We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Line Movement. Joining us, as always, to talk through some wide receiver sleepers. He's a reception perception creator. You know him from Yahoo Sports, Matt Harmon. And you know what, Matt? Before we even dive into it, I do have one very big question for you. What is the fallout of this Will Fuller suspension overall? We're just going to jump right into it, Matt. I know you got a football game to watch right now. So what was your first, reaction to this debacle in Houston?
Yeah, absolutely wild that there's a game going on, as we're talking about week 13. Week 12 hasn't even ended yet. Absolutely a bummer to lose Will Fuller. I mean, just to put it lightly, I mean, it sucks. This is a huge problem for Fuller in general as he's going into free agency. I mean, I don't know that teams will care all that much. I think they'll have the same questions that they would have had about Will Fuller and his health or whatever that they would have had coming out of this year anyways, whether this suspension happens or not. So maybe it doesn't affect his value too much, but it definitely leaves a huge hole in the Houston offense, right? Like we, especially compounded with the idea that they just released Kenny Stills, like this wide receiver depth chart coming into the year, it looked pretty stacked, with Fuller, Cooks, Stills, and Cobb. Now Cobb is hurt, Stills is gone, Fuller's out of the mix. This is now, like we talked about, Kiki QT coming into the Thanksgiving game, didn't do too much on Thanksgiving, which is not surprising necessarily because they have two guys on the outside that they can funnel the targets to, Fuller and Cooks. Now that Fuller's out of the mix, I mean, it constricts the entire field. I think Cooks is a good player. I think he's a solid number 2 receiver, but Fuller had fully developed this year into a competent number 1, a guy that stretches the field, can win in tight spaces, can win in the red zone. I mean, he can do it all, and I think reception perception would show you that he has all of the makings of a top-level deep threat, a guy that truly does dictate coverages, and that's why defenses have been in such a bind since Fuller's been in the pros and when he's been healthy with Watkins and especially with Hopkins on the other side. Like, you just didn't know who you had to derive the defensive attention to. So it's a huge loss. I don't think Watson's playing to a level that I think he will elevate whoever's in the lineup right now. That's how good he's playing, but there's no doubt about it. It's definitely the receiver core has taken a huge hit just in the last couple of weeks alone.
Such a bummer, man. It's been so nice to see Will Fuller throughout this entire season and have a lot of success. So this is tough overall, tough for the offense. I think that there's a lot of people that are just going to, funnel towards someone like Brandon Cooks to just take over a lot of this volume. But I don't know. Maybe he's not a true number 1. I think that, yes, his volume could spike a little bit, but I think this offense as a whole is really going to miss Will Fuller. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we progress through this. So it is week 13. The first guy that Matt wants to talk about today, Michael Pittman. He's 4,900 at Houston, so it was kind of a nice transition for us there in this game. Last week, 9 targets, only 2 catches for 28 yards, but this is a guy that definitely, how valuable is the number 1 wide receiver with, Rivers throwing the ball to him, but he sounds like this is a guy that you're bullish on this week.
Yeah, I mean, the volume's been there. The role has been there. You mentioned it, 9 targets last week, 8 targets in his kind of breakout game. 7 targets in his big breakout game against the Tennessee Titans on Thursday Night Football. Then he has 8 targets against the Packers the next week, 3 against the Tennessee, I'll mix myself up here. He has 3 targets in the long play, but you get the deal. Pittman is out there. He's been playing extremely well, I think. Like, this is a guy that has fully developed into that number 1 receiver from a role perspective. I think from a player perspective, we've talked about him before. He's good. Like, he can win downfield. We've seen him make explosive plays after the catch, which, as you mentioned it, with Phillip Rivers is going to be key. He's not just one of these big long striders like a guy like Mike Williams or Malcolm Floyd, some of the players that Rivers succeeded with the LA Chargers or the San Diego Chargers. Like, he's not that type of guy. He's a full field player that can win in the short game too. So I know that the big narrative this week is obviously T.Y. Hilton, his history against the Texans. Maybe that does work for Hilton because the Texans defense is that bad. They also have another suspension too in Bradley Roby, who is a guy, one of the few tracking cornerbacks that was shadowing guys around the field. And you can argue how good of a player Roby is or whatever, but it's still a big downgrade for that secondary, which is going to be helpful for Phillip Rivers because I thought last week he just didn't look like himself. He looked like a decreased version of an already decreased player, considering that he's working with an injury right now. But I think the fact that Pittman has shown he has that after-catch big play potential in the short game, as well as what he did in college in the long game. I think he makes a perfect play in this game that I do think, just like last week, that game was higher scoring. We talked about it going into the week too. That was a higher scoring game than people thought with the Titans and the Colts. Obviously, the Titans did most of the work, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a similarly high scoring game in this one too.
Yeah, I like that one quite a bit. Just looking at this team overall, Michael Pittman over the last 4 games does have a 20% air yards market share, which is pretty solid. A lot still going to T.Y. Hilton, just not a lot happening with some of those targets, unfortunately. So in the same range, another guy that I think is super interesting this week, if you wanted to get back on the Aaron Rodgers train, Allen Lazard. He's $5K in this spot. Tell us why you like him this week.
Yeah, I think Lazard, obviously we saw him draw red zone targets, score a touchdown. He still ran fewer routes than Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but we also have to remember that Lazard did get banged up in that game a little bit too. I think that it's basically what you said. Like, we know that Lazard can produce when called upon. For the most part this year, he's been a productive, useful player for the Packers, but it is just getting attachment to Aaron Rodgers right now, who I think, I mean, they're the most efficient offense in the league right now from a balance perspective. Obviously, with the Chiefs having the passing game, it's hard to deny that. But from a rushing perspective success rate and a passing success rate perspective, these guys are in complete balance right now with the Packers. And Rodgers, leading the NFL with 33 touchdowns, like, he's just an unstoppable force at this point. I love the way, and Lazard is part of this too, because it's one thing when you just have Davante Adams out there, and I think Adams has been the best receiver in the league this year. Hard to say that after what we just saw with Tyreek Hill last week, but at the same time, I think that Adams has been the best receiver in the league. He separates extremely well. He has to be the focus of your attention, and when Rodgers has guys like Lazard taking the plays away from MVS, who's a mistake-prone player, Lazard's just a clean, guy. He's going to get open, he's going to catch the ball, and he can make plays in the vertical game as well, too. We saw that against the Saints. But, again, similar script there. When Lazard is involved, when Tonyan is involved, when all these guys are out there and healthy, Rodgers, the way that this offense is dialed in right now, it's just a great game script. And we saw, I think, that just this Philly secondary, this Philly defense, saw it with the Seahawks on Monday night. It's not a defense that should really move the direction either way. I think you can attack them. I think you can attack them vertically. So this is just getting cheap exposure to how good the Packers offense is right now with the guy in Lazard, who I think is an underrated player.
Yeah, they're making it look pretty easy right now, which is interesting. It's just crazy that we talked about this on Monday, that we could be looking at this Green Bay Packers team. If they would have taken, just take your pick of any of these wide receivers in the first or second round this year alongside Davante Adams, that would have been a lot of fun.
T. Higgins, Pittman, right. One of these guys that we're talking about here. It was a huge, I understand they sort of wanted to look to the future, whatever. The A.J. Dillon pick to me is the more egregious one of the two, because it's not a valuable position, and you have one of the best backs in the league in Aaron Jones and a guy behind him in Jamal Williams who's stepped up pretty well. Not to mention, too, you don't need to plan for the future at running back, okay? You could have just made a running back pick next year. But I guess there's no point to relitigate history. But, yeah, it is an unbelievable thing that they did not draft a receiver there. It would look so much better. But at the same time, like I said, Lazard is not a guy, I believe Adam Levitan asked me this coming into this year, if this was just another Geronimo Allison. I don't think so. Allison was a guy that, when you put him through reception per reception, absolutely couldn't play. Lazard is not that. He's definitely, a near league average type of number 2, number 3 receiver. And that goes a long way considering some of the other players that Rodgers has worked with lately.
Crazy, man. I just would have liked to have seen it in general, I think. I think a lot of people probably feel that way, but now we're just seeing some of these guys, I guess, come out of the woodwork from this draft, and you're just like, man, just to straight knob wave any of those guys when you have Aaron Rodgers playing like this in his prime. Unfortunate. I guess another kind of unfortunate situation, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're still not very good. Good matchup this week against the Vikings. This wide receiver core, obviously DJ Chark is banged up. Keelan Cole at 3,800 seems like a pretty nice salary saving option this week. Last week he did have 6 targets. So tell us why you're on Keelan Cole in week 13.
Yeah, I think when you look at the 4K-ish, sub 4K range, like the punt play type of guys, we've talked plenty on this show about Denzel Mims, about Perryman. That Jets receiver core has kind of been the place that you'd look for if you're really, really trying to save some coin. But I think Keelan Cole is actually in a really good spot this week. You mentioned the matchup with the Minnesota Vikings. I think the Vikings have started to play a touch bit better on defense. Like, they're not a complete joke like they were earlier in the season. However, they're still going to let up some big plays. We saw Robbie Anderson take a long catch and run pass against him. I feel like the Panthers have been trying to hit that play with Robbie Anderson, where just a quick crossing route, the shallow across the field. Like, they've been trying to hit that big play with Anderson for a few weeks now. Finally happens against the Vikings. Those mistakes are still going to happen with a young defense. But more important, man, if you rostered DJ Moore last week, I rostered DJ Moore over Robbie Anderson, and I regretted it. But, like, you saw the open field that DJ Moore was streaking through down the field, a guy that's won plenty in the deep game this year. He was getting open on those plays, and Bridgewater, just missed him. The game winner, too. Teddy easily could have thrown it to DJ Moore in that spot. I think that shows you that there are still some holes in this Viking secondary. And Keelan Cole, number one, he's a guy that I've always had a little bit of a candle lit for. I really liked his reception perception coming out of his rookie year. Then he had a bunch of drops in the early parts of his second season, sort of faded from the picture. But this year, he's pretty much been the clear-cut number 2 receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. People wanted it to be Shenault, another rookie from this last year's class. I definitely like Shenault in the long term, but Keelan Cole has been that guy, and he's been productive in spots too. Over his last 4 games, he's the team leader in terms of routes run. He's not been getting a ton of targets. It's been hit or miss based on, like you mentioned, when DJ Chark plays. But in this spot, like, I hate to say it, but kind of liked what I saw from Mike Glennon last week. Glennon stinks. He's not a good quarterback. He's definitely just a mid-tier backup. Like, I don't really need to take a look at Mike Glennon to see what's there. We know he's just a backup type of guy, but he's definitely an upgrade over Jake Luton. Maybe comparable to what they were getting out of Gardner Minshew. Maybe that's not as big of a downgrade as I thought it was going to be. So Cole getting a ton of work, potentially the top target in the passing game there. Good matchup with a quarterback that's at least playing functionally. For the savings that you're going to get on him, I think that he makes a lot of sense in this particular spot.
I like that one a lot. I think that's just like the game script should be there. I think that game, we just talked about it with Reeves, that game has a lot of potential to, like, I guess, shoot out on this kind of weird slate overall. Some of the highest totals on the slate, like we have Tennessee and Cleveland as one of the highest totals on the slate, which seems crazy. If Reeves was saying, if you would have said that in week 1, I would have told you that you were crazy, that a game like that would lead the way in terms of points. So that's interesting overall. But that's it.
Joe, man. Your guy Kirk Cousins, like, to talk about this game, why this could shoot out. Maybe Reeves already read off some of these stats, but like 9th in EPA per play, 3rd in Pro Football Focus deep passing percentage among guys that have started 5+ games, and 2nd in Next Gen Stats expected completion percentage over expectation. Like, he's playing like a top 10 quarterback with Justin Jefferson, our guy Justin Jefferson, and obviously Adam Thielen when he's out there. He just got activated too. Like, I 100% believe this game could turn into a high-flying shootout. And we saw last week in negative game script that Glennon held his own against another defense that is, not great either in the Cleveland Browns, especially when they don't have Myles Garrett. So I love the way this game sets up, and Cole's just a real cheap piece to get a look at this game.
Little mini stacks, condensed offenses, all things that are very good things. Matt Harmon, everyone, make sure you follow him on Twitter. He's at MattHarmon_BYB. By the way, there's people that are saying that Justin Jefferson is one of my guys now, so I should probably thank you for that if people are associating that guy with me now, because we've talked about him a lot. It's all going well. I'm not a big Vikings fan in general, but people are so down on Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, like the state of Minnesota. I think he's been pretty good. I kind of like going after this offense at low ownership every week. So good stuff, man. Best of luck in week 13. We'll talk to you very soon, all right? Patreon for anyone that's here for the first time. We do have a exclusive Discord chat community. It's $1 per month, 25 cents per week. We have a DraftKings tournament each and every week between the group of us. I've been giving away an Amazon gift card this week for every rating and review that I get on the Joe Holka Show at Apple Podcasts. I'm going to be adding $1 to the prize pool. So that'll be a cool little wrinkle this week. Wanted to kind of thank you guys for 10K subs overall on YouTube. It's been really cool to see this thing grow this year. We do have a Red Zone stream room in there. Obviously, the last minute 15 to 30 minute live stream only for the Patreons in Discord. So we would love to have you guys join our community, and we'll see you guys there very soon.